So I want to talk about blending and the importance of not blending until you have the canvas covered. You know, if you're painting an object, you should paint the entire object and have all the canvas covered and all your color basically put in before you do any blending at all. And I want to explain to you why that's so important. And I also want to suggest to you an exercise that I think is something that I sort of came up with recently as a way to sort of force people to get beyond this habit of over blending everything. It's the number one thing that I see in my students. Even in students that are successful with my method and are doing well, the one thing that persists and the one thing that they can't seem to stop doing is over blending or overworking whatever they're painting. If you look at all the, this is a matter of taste, but in my opinion, the great realist artist, not one of them over blended. There's always if you get in there close, you can see the brushwork, you can see the fact that they've put in one color and another color, and it's not all smooth together. It's even, I have a video where I talk about painting ugly, where if you get up close and you look at a Sargent painting, if you look at the hair, and this goes for any realist artist that paints with a strong stroke, there's nothing there. It's ugly. It doesn't look like hair when you get up close. It doesn't look like porcelain if it's a teapot. It doesn't look like what it is when you get up close. It's sort of that magic trick where you're in a museum and you look at a beautiful painting, and then as you walk up close to it, you realize it's just a bunch of jumbled brushwork. And that's really the essence of the problem, because when you're sitting there painting and trying to paint something and make it look real, you want to be able to see it. And the reality is that when you're up close, you don't see it. As an artist, you see brushwork, you see a mess of paint and color, and you don't actually see the teacup or whatever it is. And you want to see it, so you overwork it and you fix it and you fix it and you fix it and you polish it up so that up close it still looks good to you. But the reality is these great paintings, when you step back away from them, they look good, but when you walk up close, they fall apart, and hair is not hair, and lips are not lips, they're just a dash of color. And if you're sitting there painting it yourself and looking at that dash of color for lips, the temptation to go in there and smooth that up and fix it is huge, and it's something that's really, really hard to overcome. So I'm going to tell you about this exercise that I think will work for anybody if you do it and you don't cheat, if you follow these very simple rules. And so what I propose that you do, and this is something that doesn't need to be, you need to stop thinking about what I think you should do is to paint a single painting. And it could be a still life from life. It can be, you could work from a photograph. If you do, it should be a good photograph. But let's say you do one painting. Let's just say it's a still life, and you're going to work from life, and or from a photograph. But I say I prefer life just because I know that there's so many poor quality photographs out there, and if you work from life, you know the colors are going to be fantastic and good and everything else. Plus, a lot of times when you work from life, it's easier to paint with a stronger stroke. And when you work from a photograph and it's right in front of your face, you tend to overpaint the detail because you can see the detail so well. But let's say that you're going to set up a still life and you're going to paint it. And what I propose as the exercise is that you don't think about trying to do a pretty painting. That just throw that idea out the window and just completely take that out of the equation. So that your goal is not to do a pretty painting, not to paint a painting that you love, not to even make it look real. In fact, I would say that the only rule that you need to follow is that your values need to be right and your colors need to be right. And that means that you're using your color checker and you're checking all your colors. You're not guessing. You're letting the color checker guide you, but you're laying in your color. And if you get all your values right, and they don't have to be perfect, but if you get your values more or less right, If that finished painting is ugly and horrible and poorly painted and is, and everybody hates it, then you've succeeded. You get an A for the course as long as your values are right. Okay? So in other words, in order to do this exercise and score 100, so to speak, you haven't blended a single stroke. Okay? You've laid in your colors, and even with the intention of saying, you know what? I want to paint a painting and I want all my values to be right. And I want things to be more or less where they should be, but they don't have to be perfect. But more or less, I'm going to take my time and do the lines right. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm going to lay in these splotches of color. I'm going to put in several steps. I'm not just going to put in a shadow and a highlight. I'm going to put in, 4 or 5 or 6 steps, or even more, as many steps as you want. But there won't be a single, if you blend one stroke, if you go in there and fix something by pushing it around and playing with it, which is blending, or by even blending because you think things don't look smooth and it looks jumbled and you want it to be like a smooth teapot, you're just simply not allowed to do that. The whole point of this exercise is to finish with a very ugly painting that you hate everything about, but your values are right, okay? And you haven't blended a single stroke. So if you can get through that exercise, and keep in mind that your goal is to make it as horrible as you can make it, so long as your values are right and you're laying all your colors in basically where they need to go, but you're not blending one bit. So now let me see if I can explain to you why I think blending is something you should do at the very end and not something that you should do as you work, which is what most people do. If you're trying to judge your values, or you're trying to judge whether or not your painting is working, and this is especially true if you're working wet and wet, and that's what I teach with the draw mix paint method that I teach. And if you're laying in your colors properly and your values are correct, before you have your object finished, it's going to look completely wrong to you. Unless you have a really well-trained eye, the values are going to look wrong, the shadows are going to look wrong, and you're going to be really tempted to go in there and fix it, because what everybody does is they look at, and I mean amateurs or people who aren't familiar with what I'm talking about with the no blending, you're always looking at your painting and you're saying, how can I make this look better? How can I fix this? How can I make this look pretty to my eye, a foot from your face or 2 feet from your face, as opposed to how it's going to look at a room's length. And even then, it's hard to judge because of the artist's curse, because of this, there's a lot of reasons. But especially before you have the canvas covered, you really can't make a judgment about your values. And so that goes back to what I tell people, and that is that there's 2 very distinct modes in painting. There's the part where you're covering the canvas, where you're laying in your values, and you're doing it based on color checking, or you're using a proportional divider even to get your lines right when you're laying in your colors. But when you do that, when you lay in your colors and you start to put something in and it's not finished, it's going to look wrong to you. And you really have to trust the color checker, and you have to trust, when you fill up your brush with color, you've done it because you've checked the color with the color checker, you've moved it around, you've said how far to the left does this go, how far to the right, how far up, and you do your research, so to speak, with the color checker, and then you paint that color exactly where you see it on the canvas. And when you do that, and when you lay these colors in one on top of another, not blending together, not fixing, not playing on your canvas, but literally just laying in those splotches of color in any old way you want, and it's just amazing what you can get away with. It doesn't matter what sort of brushwork you have. It doesn't have to even look like Sargent's. You can go out there and find all kinds of different brushwork. But the common denominator to all of those is that the color is not all smoothed together into this sort of monochromatic, smooth a wash of color or lack of color. There's always a texture to it, and that's the ability to paint and to leave it alone. And so that's what this method is all about. So let me go back to the two distinct modes of painting. So as you lay in your color and as you cover the canvas of the object you're painting, you're trusting the color checker, and you're kind of doing it blindly, and you're not allowing yourself to make a judgment about whether something looks right or wrong. But once the canvas is covered, then you have the ability to see whether things look different, and you can decide, is my shadow too dark or is my shadow too light? And you don't even have to be a trained artist to see it. You know, you can be painting your very first painting, and once you get all the values put in, and that's the important thing, is that you've covered the canvas. And then if I sit you down and I ask you and I say, do you see how your shadow is lighter color or lighter value than the still life? And you'll be able to see it, and you can see it. And if I say, do you see how the reflection is more subtle in the still life and how in yours it's too big? And you can see it. But it takes having that canvas covered where you're in a position where your eyes can see and you can make those judgments. And so there's a real distinct difference between laying in your color, covering the canvas, and then once the canvas is covered, and this is really just for that object that you're painting with a little bit of background around it, which is real important, then you have the ability to make judgments about value, but not until then. So this all goes back to the importance of not blending, getting your colors put in, painting the whole object, and then at that point, if you want to blend and you want to smooth things out, you can do it. But even then, I encourage you to, go look at, John Singer Sargent or Repin's work and notice how they really always, to a certain degree, and sometimes in the extreme, left things unblended. If you go to drawmixpaint.com, you can find links to all my free videos. If you go to genevafineart.com, you can find out all about the paint that I use to paint with, that I manufacture myself right here in Austin, Texas. And thank you so much for watching.